Florida is one of the most visited states in America. 50 million tourists a year. Theme parks, beaches, golf courses, retirement communities. The state has built an entire economy on showing people what it wants them to see. But Florida has another layer entirely, a layer of military installations that don't appear on public maps. Underwater archaeology the state has quietly restricted access to. Ecosystems so fragile and so strange, they've been sealed off from the public for decades. Cold War infrastructure still standing, still classified, tucked into swamps and barrier islands that most Floridians have never heard of. The Florida on the brochure is real, but it's a very small part of the story. These are 19 hidden spots in Florida the government doesn't talk about. Spot 19 Eglin Air Force Base backcountry. 600 square miles the public cannot enter. Eglin Air Force Base in the Florida Panhandle is the largest Air Force base in the world by area, covering roughly 640 square miles of longleaf pine forest, river systems, and coastal wetlands in Okaloosa County. The base itself is well known. What is less known is the nature of what is being protected inside it. The interior of Eglin contains some of the most pristine and ecologically significant longleaf pine habitat remaining in North America, a forest type that once covered 90 million acres of the American South and now exists on less than 3% of its original range. Rare species. Old growth. Ecosystems that existed before European contact and have been accidentally preserved by military restriction. The public cannot enter. The ecosystem survives because of it. Spot 18 Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The launch pads that history forgot. Everyone knows Kennedy Space Center. Far fewer people know that directly adjacent to it, behind a separate fence line, sits Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, the original launch site of the American space program, and a facility containing more than 40 historic launch complexes that are not part of any public tour. Launch Complex 26, where America's first satellite reached orbit in 1958. Launch Complex 14, where John Glenn launched into orbit in 1962. Structures that defined the 20th century, sitting abandoned and rusting behind restricted, fencing on a barrier island that the public passes by on US 1. Without any indication of what is just out of sight, access is available through limited historical tours. The majority of the complex remains off limits. Spot 17 Avon Park Air Force Range. Bombing runs over a forgotten landscape. Avon Park Air Force Range covers approximately 106,000 acres in Highlands and Polk counties in central Florida, a vast expanse of dry prairie, scrub oak, and wetlands that has been used as an active bombing and weapons testing range since World War II. Inside the restricted zone, undisturbed Florida scrub habitat shelters species found nowhere else on Earth, including the Florida scrub jay and several federally listed endemic plants. The landscape is ecologically extraordinary. It is also regularly bombed. Unexploded ordnance from 8 decades of testing is distributed throughout the range. Public access is permanently prohibited. The state of the interior, both ecological and military, is not something any agency discusses publicly with any regularity. Spot 16 Warm Mineral Springs, Sarasota County. An underwater archaeological site the state keeps quiet. Warm Mineral Springs is a natural sinkhole near Northport in Sarasota County, a circular opening roughly 200 feet in diameter, filled with warm mineral water and dropping to a depth of approximately 230 feet. It operates as a public swimming and spa facility on the surface level. What the state has been careful not to amplify is what lies in the deeper sections of the spring. In the 1970s, divers recovered human skeletal remains from depths below 80 feet, remains that were subsequently dated to over 10,000 years old, making them among the oldest human remains ever found in North America. The deep sections of the spring are now restricted to scientific diving only. The full scope of what has been found there, and what may remain, has not been publicly released in detail. Spot 15 Missile Facilities Park, Everglades. Nike missile sites buried in the swamp. During the Cold War, the United States military constructed a ring of Nike missile batteries around Miami to defend against potential Soviet bomber attacks. Several of these sites were built at the edge of the Everglades. Most have been demolished. HM-69, located inside Everglades National Park near Florida City, has not been demolished. The former missile launch site, launch pads, radar towers, barracks, and underground missile storage magazines, sits largely intact in the swamp. maintained by the National Park Service, but not prominently featured in any park promotional material. It is accessible on limited ranger-led tours. The park does not advertise it. Most visitors to Everglades National Park have no idea it exists. Spot 14 Seahorse Key, Cedar Key. A restricted island with no clear explanation, Seahorse Key is a small barrier island off the Gulf Coast near Cedar Key in Levy County. It is owned by the University of Florida and has been designated a marine laboratory and wildlife refuge. Public landing on the island is prohibited for most of the year. What draws attention is the bird behavior documented on Seahorse Key. For decades, the island hosted one of the largest colonial waterbird rookeries on the Gulf Coast. Thousands of herons, egrets, and anhingas nesting in the island's oak hammock. In 2015, every single nesting bird abandoned the island simultaneously, within a single week, leaving behind nests full of eggs and chicks. No predator was identified. No disease was found. No environmental cause was officially confirmed. The birds relocated to nearby islands and have not returned. The University of Florida continues to study the island. The cause of the mass abandonment remains unexplained. Spot 13, the Devil's Den, Williston. An underwater cave system the state underreports, Devil's Den is a dry cave in Levy County with a natural spring at its floor, a crystal-clear underground pool connected to a vast network of submerged limestone passages, extending outward beneath the surrounding farmland. It is accessible to recreational divers and snorkelers through a private operation. What the state does not publicize is the archaeological record of the cave. Fossil remains of extinct Pleistocene megafauna, mastodons, giant ground sloths, prehistoric horses, have been recovered from the cave floor, along with prehistoric human artifacts suggesting the site was used as a water source by Paleo-Indian populations over 12,000 years ago. The full extent of the cave system has not been mapped. Passages extend beyond the range of recreational divers into sections that have never been explored. Spot 12 Patrick Space Force Base Restricted Zones. Infrastructure that predates the public narrative. Patrick Space Force Base on the Atlantic coast near Cocoa Beach maintains several restricted facilities adjacent to its public-facing operations. Among them are hardened Cold War-era command bunkers, constructed in the 1950s and 1960s, blast-resistant, structures built to maintain launch control operations in the event of a nuclear strike. The bunkers are not decommissioned. Their current operational status is not publicly disclosed. The coastline around Patrick contains infrastructure whose purpose and condition the base does not discuss in public communications. Spots 11 through 1, the final 11, visual cue, map pins drop across Florida with aerial and underwater footage. 11. Ichetucknee Springs Backcountry. Columbia County, beyond the tubing runs and day-use areas. The Ichetucknee River system connects to a cave network extending miles through the Floridan aquifer. Permitted cave diving reveals chambers that have never been fully charted. The full extent of the system is unknown. Gasparilla Island South Tip. Lee County, the southern end of Gasparilla Island, contains a restricted U.S. Coast Guard lighthouse reservation that has been closed to the public since the 1970s. The surrounding waters are among the richest in Florida for undocumented Spanish colonial shipwrecks. The state has issued no salvage permits for the area. Fakahatchee Strand, Collier County, the largest strand swamp in North America, home to the highest concentration of native orchid species in the continental United States, including several that exist nowhere else on Earth. Access requires permits. The interior has been walked by almost no one. Species inventories remain incomplete. Fort Dade, Egmont Key, a Spanish-American war fortification on a barrier island at the mouth of Tampa Bay, accessible only by private boat. The island is slowly sinking. The fort's brick batteries are being reclaimed by the Gulf. The state has allocated no funds for preservation. The structures will be gone within decades. Lignum Vitae Key, Monroe County, a state botanical site in Florida Bay containing the last significant stand of original tropical hardwood hammock in the continental United States, the forest type that covered the Florida Keys before development. Access is by ranger-led boat tour only, strictly limited. The interior of the key has been walked by almost no member of the public. Tyndall Air Force Base Coastal Zone. Bay County, Hurricane Michael in 2018 devastated Tyndall, exposing infrastructure in the coastal restricted zone that had not been publicly documented. Post-storm aerial photography revealed the extent of hardened facilities along the base's Gulf Coast perimeter. The base has not discussed these facilities in public communications. Weeki Wachee Cave System, Hernando County, below the famous Mermaid Show.